Today we're talking Blackmagic, specifically about the Ursa Mini 4.6K. With this video, I'm not trying to convince you to buy this camera or to tell you that this is the best camera ever. This video is my personal opinion and almost 3 years of experience in the real world with this camera. In the early days of Blackmagic being a camera manufacturing company, they released cameras like the Pocket Cinema camera, the production camera. With those cameras, they attempted to enter the cinema market, putting cameras like the production camera 4K with high specs and cinema quality at affordable prices. And these actions made an indent in the cinema world, especially in the indie filmmaker community. In this video, I'm going to talk about how the camera performs in the real world and how my personal experience in the last 3 years have been. I've used this camera in very different scenarios. I shot documentaries, I shot adverts, I shot corporate videos, a lot of corporate videos, and I actually filmed my YouTube videos with this camera. I have plenty of footage today that I'm going to show you guys to tell you why I think this is the best camera, bang for buck. Camera specs. First of all, let's talk about the technical specs for this camera. The Ursa Mini 4.6K comes in EF or PL mount. I happen to have the EF mount. It has a Super 35 sensor, and Blackmagic claims that the camera has 15 stops of dynamic range. I found this to be true if you're shooting uncompressed RAW. This camera is perfectly balanced for handheld shooting, and it's comfortable enough for shooting long periods of time. The Blackmagic Ursa Mini retails for around $4,095 US. The other two cameras that people use to compare to the Blackmagic Ursa Mini are the Sony FS7, which retails for around $7,000 US, or the C300 Mark II, which retails now for $10,000 US. In this chart, you can see that the Ursa Mini sensor size is the second in the list, only surpassed by the Red Dragon 6K sensor, which retails for $14,000 US. Shooting resolutions and frame rate. The Ursa Mini can shoot up to 4.6K files all the way down to 1080. The maximum frame rate depends on the codec and the resolution you're using. The project frame rates you can choose go all the way from 23.98 to 60p. It has off-speed recording of up to 60 frames a second in 4.6K and up to 120 frames a second in 2K in window mode. Media and codecs. This camera uses CFast cards. It's a very expensive media at the moment. It has gone down in price since I acquired this camera 3 years ago, but it's still very expensive media. The reason behind this is because this camera records at very high bit rates. The Ursa Mini can format cards both to exFAT, which is Windows, and to HSF Plus, which is the Mac file system. The Blackmagic Ursa Mini has a variety of codecs it can shoot, and this is the list. Stop complaining. Practice makes perfect. Enough with all the technical stuff, let's talk about the camera. After almost 3 years of using and abusing this camera, I have to say, it has always behaved amazingly. First thing I'm going to say is that this, like any other camera in the market, has its limitations. Over and over, I have encountered operators without experience making complaints in forums. The main complaint I've heard online is, this camera is not a low light camera. To which I always reply, what does that even mean? I have proof that this camera performs amazingly under the worst lighting conditions. So my conclusion is that due to the fact that this camera is affordable, unlike Reds and Aris, a lot of the folks who don't necessarily have the experience can now afford this camera. Let's put a side story here. Let's go back to the days of DSLR photography. DSLRs were always very expensive, especially the high-end ones. Over the years, professional DSLRs became more affordable, so anybody could now be a photographer. Well, not really. The fact that now people can overshoot with DSLRs because media is inexpensive, these days anybody can potentially get lucky and create a masterpiece photograph without necessarily fully understanding how the camera works. The thing that separates your uncle's photographs from a professional photographer is the ability to recreate any setup and to conceptualize an idea. And that's why the professional photographer gets paid to take photos and your uncle is an accountant. Joke aside, the same happened in the video production world. Cameras are more affordable, so easily acquired, but you still need to know how to use this or any other camera, and that means understanding its limitations and its advantages. Let's drink a little bit of water because I can't talk anymore. Low light performance. I have shot a good few concerts in which I have no control over the lights whatsoever. And to make matters worse, the lights in this particular concert was those purple lights that camera sensors just can't understand. In this shot you can clearly see that the camera sensor is clipping on the blue and red channel. But this example is something I can't control, and most camera sensors behave the same under this light condition. How do I get the Ursa Mini to perform very good under low light situations? I turn the camera on 15 to 10 minutes before the shoot, put the lens cap on and calibrate the blacks in the sensor. That's it. Very simple. I try not to shoot at ISO 1600 unless I absolutely have to. I find that the dynamic range on this camera is at its best when shooting at ISO 800. I have found for particularly dark scenes it's actually better to expose for ISO 400, which is when the sensor of this camera retains more shadow details, and then in post-production it's easier to lift the shadows with less noticeable noise. Let's check this example out. This is like the worst possible scenario to be filming at. One harsh light at the subject and nothing else. The blacks are covering almost 80% of my scene, and yet there's no noticeable noise. And this was shot at ISO 800 and an f2 lens.
Audio inputs.
When I'm shooting documentary work, this camera has given me the ability to record straight into the camera. Great quality audio. It has two XLR inputs on top of the camera, which come in very handy when I'm shooting interview setups. I use one of the XLR connections to run a directional mic like a Rode NTG, and in the second XLR input I attach a radio mic which is attached to my talent. This gives me the ability to have redundancy and to never lose a soundbite. In other situations like documentary setups or interviews, I have also used the camera with a sound person. A sound person can monitor the sound levels in their own equipment and send me a feed via line through my XLR inputs. This makes my workflow very easy because the sound is being recorded straight into camera also, and saves me time in post-production not having to sync the sound file. But because the sound person is capturing and monitoring the audio in their equipment, I'm guaranteed that the levels will be the correct one. In the last scenario, when I'm not able to physically be connected to the sound person, in this case I can always record with the internal mics a scratch audio track to sync in post.
The LCD screen.
The Ursa Mini has a 5-inch LCD touchscreen. This screen is great and I have used it in various scenarios. The size is a winner for me because I can be 100% sure the scene is as it should be. The screen is bright enough to be used outside. I can see the false color and histogram, which is what I use to expose my scenes most of the time. After many years using this camera, the process has become second nature, and this has more to do with one as an operator knowing the equipment and trusting it. Via the LCD screen I can access every setting in the camera, and this allows me to be fast and efficient when dialing in my settings. In my opinion, there's no other OS more intuitive than Blackmagic designs one. The OS is very simple and it's arranged in a way that makes sense. After a few uses, one is able to memorize every setting in the camera. It is structured in 6 tabs, each one with a clear label: record, monitor, audio, setup, presets and LUTs.
The Viewfinder. Oh my god.
The Viewfinder is one of the best ones that I've tried. It has 3 buttons on the top. One for zoom, you can zoom in for critical focus. The second one for turning on and off the display overlay. And the third one for peaking. You can turn on and off your focus peaking.
Interviews and documentary.
This is where, in my opinion, the Ursa Mini overperforms most cameras that I've tried in the past. When one has the ability to control the environment, then the limit is dictated by your creativity as a DP setting up your scene. The skin tones that this camera gives are just perfect. The highlight roll-off is very soft and gorgeous. Because of the high dynamic range of this camera, I'm able to shoot scenes that would not be possible in a DSLR. For example, have a look at this scene. The interview's face is exposed to 70 IRE, which is where skin tones live. The background is just 2 stops underexposed, and the projections in the wall are about 1 stop underexposed. It all just looks perfect. This shot is for a documentary I've been working on for a while now. Run and gun situation, a directional mic just off camera, and available light. From the camera right, there's daylight coming in, very soft through a big window, and from the camera left, there's tungsten. That happens to be the lighting that the venue we were filming in had, and I had no control over it. This camera sensor is able to handle mixed lighting very well, although there have been a few times with fluorescent lights that I haven't got the best results ever. In this case of mixed lighting, the camera behaved lovely. There are overhead fluorescent tubes and glass panels that allowed daylight to enter as well. Again, I had no control over the light in this particular scene. It was just me, a sound person, and the talent. We had only 1 hour to capture the interview and get B-roll in the scene. and again the camera performed amazingly. The form factor of the Ursa Mini is amazing, and to shoot handheld feels natural to me, and it sits very naturally in my shoulder, allowing me to shoot for very long periods of time without much fatigue. Blackmagic design really nailed it, the ergonomics of this camera. Again, the dynamic range of this camera allows me to shoot scenes that would not be possible with smaller setups. Being able to shoot against the sun and still preserve shadow details is something surreal. It allows me to represent the locations as closely as I saw them with my eyes.
In conclusion,
this camera has given me the ability to capture in great detail every project I've worked on. Documentaries, music videos, adverts, vlogs, and even this YouTube video that you're watching right now. I've been a content creator for a few years now, and like a lot of you, I began my filmmaking career with a DSLR, and it served me well. I was able to work and make money doing something that I'm passionate about. I've used the Canon C300, the C100, the 5D, the 6D. In the Sony environment, I shot a few weddings with the Sony FS5, I shot a few documentaries with the Sony FS7, and countless corporate videos with the A7S Mark II and the Mark I. Although I think every camera has its advantages and disadvantages, when the time came for me to buy a camera, I chose the Blackmagic Ursa Mini. Back when I was in college studying film production, Blackmagic was making some serious noise in the film industry, and I was wowed by what they were offering. Affordable tools that can generate amazing quality and cinematic images. I actually even wrote my dissertation thesis on this matter. Is this camera for everybody? Maybe not. My recommendation is use the camera that you have available and understand it, what it can do for you and its limitations. If the equipment is stopping you from creating amazing content, then move on. Look for the correct tools to help you tell the stories. The Ursa Mini is that tool for me. It's almost like an extension of my arms, and it has gone to very remote locations with me. It has allowed me to capture stunning imagery. So my advice is take the camera you have next to you, go out and shoot. Thanks for watching this very long video. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you didn't like it, you know what to do. And see you next time.